This is what I would call the melody between the beats, the public land survey system. Where does this go in this class? Well, I'm sticking it in right here because it's something that we have to discuss. You have probably noticed, if you have flown across the United States during the day and looked down, that large swaths of the land look like that photograph which was taken over the top of central Indiana. Lots of right angles, lots of squares. Have you noticed that when you've flown across the country? Well, next time you fly, pay attention to it. And if you look at a map of the United States that shows the counties, look at that map and look at those counties, especially in the center part of the United States, right in there, where a lot of the land is flat. Notice how many right angles and how many squares there are. Well, one of the most common patterns on the American landscape is the series of squares and right angles that make up much of the country, particularly visible from the sky, but it's also visible on a map. This is known as the United States Public Land Survey System. And what it did is it divided the country into a series of what's known as townships and ranges to facilitate the sale and kind of the acquiescence of the land by and to American settlers, of course, as we know, kind of going over the top of the indigenous people who lived there. And this was created out of what's known as the Land Ordinance of 1785. So first of all, 1785, think about it. The country becomes independent, or it declares independence in 1776, and by 1782, the war has basically wrapped up. So this happens in the immediate aftermath of the Revolutionary War. And think about what the country would have been like at that time. So what it does is it divides the country up into townships, which are 36 square mile sections, so 36 1 square mile sections, and they're numbered. And then those townships are determined based on a certain kind of pattern. And ranges, which operate with the township pattern. Essentially what it comes down to is this. This is a system of latitude and longitude, but we're using different words, township and range, to describe latitude and longitude. If it was me, I would go through this the first time. So if I was a student, I would go through this the first time, watch it, try and grasp it, notice that it's going to go from big chunks of land to smaller chunks of land, and then watch it again and kind of put it together. But it's all a system of latitude and longitude. In other words, a grid system. So here's how it works. Let's start with this. Each township was given a designation based on its distance from baselines and principal meridians. Baselines are going to operate like latitude, and principal meridians are going to operate like longitude. So the baselines are east-west lines, just like the equator is the starting place for latitude. The baselines are going to be the starting place for this particular north-south system. So they are east-west lines that act as the latitudinal starting place. And they divide the land into north or south townships. The principal meridians, on the other hand, are north-south lines, but, as in they trend north-south, but they separate the townships into east or west ranges. So just like with latitude, where parallels run east-west, but they measure north-south, this is what's going to happen with the baselines and the lines that emanate out of them. And with the principal meridians, just like with longitude, where longitudinal lines run north-south, but they measure east-west, okay, this is the same thing that's going to happen with the principal meridians and the lines that emanate out of them. So the baselines are going to be the starting place for north-south measurement. The principal meridians are going to be the starting place for east-west measurements. Let's start with the baselines. So let's assume this is a map and that red line is a baseline. So this is going to be our starting place. Like if this is latitude, this would be the equator, like 0, okay? Although we don't call it 0. And now we put a whole bunch of other lines that are all essentially parallel to that first baseline on there. Now I put north and south on there. So you can see north is to the top of this diagram, away from the baseline. South is to the bottom of the diagram, away from the baseline also. Now I made a whole bunch of squares. At this point, these squares don't have any particular distinguishing moniker to them. We don't really know which one is which. They all kind of look the same. But we're going to distinguish every one of those even though they all look the same. So let's start with this. You can see that I just put T1N on there. What that means is Township 1 North. It's the first line of townships north of the baseline. So if you look, the red line is the baseline right there. Then we have this long line here of all of these 8, I believe it's 8, yes it's 8, townships. So every one of those is one township north of the baseline. So they're all going to be called Township 1 North, written like that, T1N. So that means that if you are 2 of these squares north of the baseline, you are at Township 2 North. Guess what's going to happen when we go to the next one? Township 3 North, exactly right. So what happens where that bronze arrow is at? Well, you are in the first township south of the baseline. So this is going to be called Township 1 South, written T1S, like this. So all of those are all Township 1 South. They're all one township south of the baseline, which makes all of these Township 2 South and Township 3 South. There you go. That's the first setup. So you can see already that we've begun to distinguish each one of these squares. Now I just put a blue line on there. Can you see that blue line right there? That blue line is operating as a principal meridian. And that means that everything on here now is going to be east or west of that principal meridian. Can you see I put a W on the left-hand side and an E on the right-hand side indicating west and east, okay? So the public land survey system works like this. This is where the term range is going to come in. The townships are north and south of the baselines, but the ranges are east and west of the principal meridians. But we refer to the squares as townships, not as ranges. So what that means is the word township really has 2 meanings in this. It is the 36 square mile squares and the distance north and south of the baseline. That's where you get T1N or T2N and so on. Range is only the distance east and west of the principal meridian. So back to the diagram. Now we can see all of these bronze arrows. They are pointing at the first line of squares to the west of that principal meridian, which means those are going to be called Range 1 West. And now you can see that those 6 squares are all distinguished much more acutely. T3N R1W. Can you see it? That is the only block, the only square on this diagram that is going to be T3N R1W. Okay, and notice T1 South, or Township 1 South, Range 1 West. You see where that's at? Okay, notice the whole line is all Range 1 West. Now you can see we have Range 2 West. So now we have things like T1N R2W. Township 1 North, north of the baseline, and then Range 2 West of that principal meridian. And then we have Range 3 West. Guess what's going to happen here where I put the bronze arrows? It's to the east of the principal meridian. Correct, it's going to be Range 1 East, and then Range 2 East, and then Range 3 East, Range 4 East, Range 5 East. See the way this goes? And now we have distinguished every one of those squares. They are all unique now. Remember, before they looked like that. They were all the same thing. Now they are all distinguished. Each one is an individual place on the landscape. And you can see how this matters for distinguishing who owns what. So each township is then divided into 36 sections. Each section is 1 square mile. In other words, 1 mile on each side, or 640 acres. 1 acre is about the size of an American football field, by the way. So let's assume this is a township. Let's assume it's Township 2 North, Range 3 East. Okay, that's it right there. The way we would speak this is Township 2 North, Range 3 East. But we'd write it the way it's written on the left-hand side. Now I've broken Township 2 North, Range 3 East into 36 sections. Watch what happens now. We number all of these sections. I put the coordinates on there, north, south, east, west, and here's the way it goes. We always start in the northeast corner. Can you see where I put the number 1? And then from there, we go across 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now remember, this happened a long time ago. This was surveyed a long time ago. People did not have automobiles. People did not have airplanes. This was done either by foot or was done with an animal, like a horse. And so if you went across those 6 miles, what are the chances you were going to ride all the way or walk all the way back across to right where that red arrow is at to start at 7? Yeah, the answer is like not possible at all. So what happens is 7 is right there, the closest square to you. And then you begin to go across the landscape like that, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Then guess what happens? 13 is going to be right where that red is at. You go across, then 19. Yep, that's the way it goes. This is the way you fill it in. So you start in the northeast corner, you end in the southeast corner. And you can see what happens. If what we just did was we mapped out that yellow township and range right in the middle, okay? So you can see what happened. If somebody was doing the orange on the top, they went 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. When they finish 36, where do they go? They go to 1. And then they go through all that yellow, and then they get to 36, they go to blue number 1, and so on. That's the way it was mapped. So these are all 1 square mile containing 640 acres. So that's 1 township, all right? That's 1 full township. Remember, we refer to the entire 36 square miles as a township. So it's Township 2 North, Range 3 East. Sorry, stumbled a little bit. Okay, there it is right there. Let's look at Section 9. If you owned all of Section 9, it would be Section 9, Township 2 North, Range 3 East, written like I have it down there at the bottom. You go from the smaller unit to the larger unit. So this is Section 9, 1 square mile. All of these 1 square mile units are broken then into 4 quadrants. Each quadrant has 160 acres in it. Okay? That's why this looks like it does. Each one of those squares is 160 acres. That's right. So the way we name these is the northeast quarter, which is written in W quarter like that. The northwest quarter written like that. The southwest quarter written like that. And then the southeast quarter written like that. So if we were looking at that particular one where the bronze arrow is at, that would be the southeast quarter, Section 9, Township 2 North, Range 3 East. And you can see we are getting very specific, 160 acres of land. So this is southeast quarter of Section 9, Township 2 North, Range 3 East. And that is 160 acres, which is also broken into 4 quadrants, each of 40 acres. This is where the term, I'm going to go work on the north 40, or I'm going to work on the back 40, okay, or 40 acres and a mule. This is where this terminology comes from. And it's broken up the same way, the northeast quarter, the northwest quarter, the southwest quarter, and the southeast quarter. So what is this? What is this? What would we call this? This is the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 9, Township 2 North, Range 3 East. So it would be right there where that bronze arrow is pointing. And it would be right there on our map. Okay, now we can look at it another way. Okay, here's another township grid. You can see the principal meridian and the baseline, and notice Township 2 South, Range 3 West is highlighted in white. And then you can see Section 14, and then Section 14 is then broken up into all those squares. And you can see in some cases people own half of one of these squares. The eastern half of the southeast quarter of Section 14 of Township 2 South, Range 3 West. That's how we get that landscape. That's how we get Iowa looking the way it looks with those counties. That's how Oklahoma looks the way it looks. Now you can see there's some rivers there that break this up, but in general, this is the way the counties are broken up. If you look at this in Arizona, you can see the principal meridian right here, and you can see, which is this line right here, and then you see the baseline right here, which is that. If we take a look at this one over here, which is Township 1 North, Range 1 East, right there, you can see how it's broken up. These are the sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you look at number 2, you can see how square everything is. Now, this map shows you in 1775 the 13 colonies and then eventually Maine. And that was the land that was occupied. Everything to the west of that was Indian territory, and then that kind of bronzy color was French territory that eventually became the Louisiana Purchase. You could see on this map the baselines of the principal meridians, if you look closely, that we've used. As we went across the country, what happened is we increased the number of baselines and principal meridians as people moved across the country. You can see very close up right there, Washington, Oregon, baselines and meridians.